for more perspective on those Omicron travel bans, let's bring in Clint Henderson, senior news editor at travel website The Points Guy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So for people who aren't familiar, what sort of variations are we seeing now with these travel rules during COVID, depending on the region?
So if you are an American traveling overseas, you have to have a test within 24 hours, within 1 day of your departure back to the United States. Interestingly, Americans are not subject to travel bans like the ones you see for Southern Africa. So American citizens are not being trapped overseas ever, but that is happening in some cases, especially, when the Omicron variant first came out, people were in a panic and you saw countries react immediately to ban travelers, and not probably always the best solution, because as we've seen, the variants were already all around the world by the time these travel bans were put into place. So they haven't been that effective at preventing the spread of COVID.
And obviously you're seeing people stuck in the middle. I mean, with the difficulty in keeping up with these changes as you travel between some countries that require things like vaccine passports, others that don't, some of these varying quarantine restrictions, do you think some sort of universal COVID pass for travel will be in the works, or is that a no-go?
I think the governments have considered it, and trust me, as someone who's been reporting on this from the beginning, I keep a complete country-by-country guide updated at our site on thepointsguy.com. It's a beast to keep track of because things change every single day. Governments have talked about doing some kind of universal vaccine passport, but there's a lot of political opposition to things like that. We can't even get a vaccine requirement for travel within the United States, let alone trying to sort of get all the countries on the planet to work together on this front. So no, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But I think the airlines are getting much better at sort of keeping a lid on this and having an organized system. I think eventually you're going to see a system where the airline you're flying will make sure all your documents are checked. In fact, we've already seen this roll out with some like American Airlines and Delta.
And you touched on the controversy of some of these travel bans. I mean, talk about the implications and whether they work.
So what we've seen is they don't work. So the United States, when COVID first emerged, we had all these travel bans, and it turned out that COVID was already widely spreading within the United States. And the same thing has happened with Delta variant and now with the Omicron variant. We imposed this travel ban. At the time, Dr. Anthony Fauci said that he just wanted to give the United States time to prepare. But a week later, he was saying maybe we'll get rid of the ban. It seems discriminatory. And the truth is that Omicron was already in over half of the the states within the United States. So the travel bans don't work. I would much rather see a sort of universal tracing program, or even testing to be more widely available, because that's where you really see the spread and when it's spreading in the community.
And when you do things like shut borders and stop travelers from coming in, what do these restrictions mean, not just for things like local economies, but things like tourism, a lot of these key sectors that depend on the free movement of people?
Within the United States, we've seen almost a full recovery of domestic travel, but internationally, still less than 30% of what we saw pre-pandemic. And when you have a new variant emerge like this, the press blows it up. It just totally destroys that budding rebound in international travel. It's totally devastating for developing countries. Developed countries are better able to handle the blows to their economies, but some of these countries are completely dependent on tourism. And so when you shut borders, the signal you're sending is to Americans, don't go to these countries. And it's a brutal impact for the economies there.
And I want to talk about the reaction we saw with Omicron in Southern Africa. What did governments that blocked visitors from some of these African countries, what were they hoping to accomplish this time around?
I think it was fear-based in a lot of cases. I think what they were hoping was, the idea is that if you ban travel, you prevent the new variant from coming to your shores. But as we know, it's already in most shores by the time you discover it. And so I think the idea is, to prepare or to try to prevent it. But, I think we'd be better off helping the countries around the world get vaccinated than trying to impose travel bans.
So until we can get the whole world vaccinated then, how should the US and others revamp their COVID travel protocols if and when some of these new variants do arise?
So I think the best way you could control the spread is by having a really rigorous track and trace program. It's one of the things that's been missing from the get-go, and I I don't quite understand why the government hasn't been better at tracing returning visitors once they're home. There's almost no checks once you arrive in the United States as an American. And even during this travel ban, Americans could come and go as they please still. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense as a pandemic prevention measure. I think we'd be better off if we had a really rigorous track and trace program with testing. I think these programs where you arrive in the country, you go into a quarantine until your test results come back, that seems to be the key to keeping outbreaks from spreading. And I would love to see more of that kind of here in the United States.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for your insights. Clint Henderson there, Senior News Editor at The Point Sky. All right, coming up after the